Hello and welcome to Sam Not So Wise. My name is Sam. So what's more exciting than talking about books you have read? You know, it's talking about books that we're going to read. Massive lists of TBRs, we all love them. So as we get towards the end of 2024, it's time to look ahead into 2025. And that's what we're going to do today. This is my 2025 TBR list. So I'm not the biggest TBR maker. I like to leave a lot of room for mood reading and when I find cheap books basically out in the wild or on the Kindle store. But I generally do have 2 or 3 series that I aim to read throughout a year, along with some other kind of standalones and other things that I want to get to. So with much more stumbling and much further ado, let's talk about 2025. So of course we'll start with the definites, the ones that are nailed down, that are guaranteed that I'm going to be reading in 2025. Fingers crossed. So I mentioned that I usually plan out 2 or 3 series within a year, and these are the ones that I am definitely going to read. The first one, Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. I'm going to be reading his short story collection later this month, The Paper Menagerie and Other Stories, and I've just heard nothing but brilliant things about this series. I love history, I love East Asia, and this is basically based upon Chinese history, or at least a portion of it, not all of it. And I've heard it is just epic and emotional and thematically driven. There are 4 humongous books. So I'm really excited about this one. I think it's going to really fit me. I mean, I hope so. I know that a bunch of YouTubers are going to be reading it as well and having chat discussions. So that's fun for me to be able to follow along with them and know what they're talking about. So that is my first priority, starting maybe January, maybe February, depending on life. The second series I will be reading is Gunmetal Gods. So I haven't really read any self-published works. I've read a few. I've read Philip Chase's stuff and a couple of others that I'm forgetting right now. And I want to change that. I want to read a bit more self-published stuff because I feel like it's a duty to support people who are really fighting in the arts, because I know how that feels. But also I know that there are fun, exciting reads out there that aren't going through the traditional route of publishing. So this one really excites me. I think it's a 4-book series, and just from the cover alone, I'm excited about it. I'm not really sure what it's about, but I've heard a lot of people say good things about it, so I'm feeling good about reading this series. Now, the other ones that I'm thinking of, so firstly, I'll just say I'm going to finish the Tyrant Philosophers trilogy by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I've read the first 2. The final book in the trilogy, called Days of Shattered Faith, came out the other day, and I really want to finish that. So that's a priority for January. I'm very much excited to finish out this trilogy because I really enjoyed the first 2 books. Now, another series I'm going to start and absolutely will not finish, guaranteed I won't finish it, is Malazan Book of the Fallen, starting with Gardens of the Moon, of course. Now, I've been frightened of this series for a long time because of what everybody says about it. It's really hard, it's really difficult, it's complex, the books are humongous, the series is really, really long. So yeah, but I really want to read it. I think I've finally built up my reading chops to be able to get into this, so I am going to start Malazan in 2025. I don't know when, I need to see. I can't imagine it being within the first half of the year, so maybe towards autumn will be when I'm starting it, we will see. But definitely reading Gardens of the Moon and hopefully a couple of more later in the year. So some standalones to go between these big old series. One that I'm definitely going to read is, quite surprisingly, is A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. So my friend Shanin at Shanin's Shelf is doing kind of a year-long read-along of Mark Twain books. I definitely want to read this one because I hear it's somewhat sci-fi adjacent, which is very interesting considering when it was written. So the month that he's reading this, I definitely want to read along with him. And we'll see, maybe I'll have a chat with him, I don't know. But depending on how I go along with that and just life, I might join him for other books as well. I've actually got a book to hold up, and it's House of Suns by Alistair Reynolds. I bought this years ago. I love Alistair Reynolds. I don't know why I keep pushing it down the road, but I've heard this is a brilliant, brilliant book. So I'm very keen to get to this, and I love a sci-fi standalone, so I'm very excited to read it. Now, Stephen King is one of my favourite authors of all time, so I have to read at least one Stephen King book within 2025. I have a couple on my Kindle, and the one that is screaming out to me the most is The Green Mile. Obviously extremely famous through its film as well. This isn't an overly long Stephen King book either, so, you know, it's not as daunting as some of his other books, but I really, really want to get to this, so that is guaranteed to be read. Maybe I'll read more, I'll talk about that in a second. And Ian Banks, my actual favourite author. I will be reading some more Ian Banks, because even though he's my favourite, he wrote a lot of books, and there are still more to read for me. So I did a buddy read of The Use of Weapons with Whitney from Secret Source of Storycraft and Bart from Bark's Bookspace. We read Use of Weapons, can't remember if I just said that, maybe, by Ian M. Banks, third book in the culture, my favourite sci-fi series of all time, and the experience of reading along with them was just so much fun. I felt like I got so much more out of the book, and it was just such a wonderful experience. So we're talking about doing another buddy read, maybe in January, maybe in February, and that will probably be The Algebraist, which is a sci-fi book by Ian M. Banks, but not within the culture. I've not read any of his sci-fi books outside of the culture, so this makes me extremely excited to see what else his crazy brain came up with. So hopefully we'll be reading that in January or February, but that is pretty much a guarantee, I think. But we had a chat discussion, by the way, and I really highly recommend you go and check that out. It was Bart's first ever video in his Why Sci-Fi chat discussion video series. So I was super lucky to be invited to that. I recommend you go to his channel and check it out. We also talked about Use of Weapons. I'll put a link in the description, so please go and watch it. I had a great time. Those guys are brilliant. I also want to read Fearsome Engine, which is another one of his sci-fi series books outside of the culture. So this one is quite thin. I'm guessing it's quite heavy because it's Ian M. Banks, but I will be reading that. And I also like reading his contemporary fiction, so I will read at least one of his contemporary works. I have Dead Air by him at the moment on my shelves, so this is going to be read in 2025. So those are the reads I am guaranteed to get to. Obviously, my extended TBR is extremely long, and I'm going to continue talking about things that are high on my priority list for the rest of the year and those that may sneak in. But before that, I want to give you a side note about things in my life which will affect that, basically. So I will be going to university. I'm starting university again as a mature student in January, studying English of all things. So obviously that's going to have a big effect on my life. I'm going to have to be doing a lot of reading for my course, both, you know, just academic stuff, but also novels as well. So that is going to take up a lot of my reading time and just lifetime. Let me know if you want me to talk about the books I read within my degree, not the academic stuff, but any novels. I'm interested to know what people think. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do with that. Also, I run a book club in Reykjavik here, a sci-fi fantasy book club, so I have no idea what we'll be picking for the books. We usually read 6 to 8 books a year. It's not extremely frequent, but I don't know what they're going to be. So 6 to 8 books, I cannot tell you what they're going to be, but I will obviously talk about them as and when I read them. Also, I do hope that I get into other buddy reads throughout the year. This is kind of why I joined YouTube and BookTube, to talk to people about books, have great reading experiences with other people, and have discussions. So I'm hoping that at some point, you know, I have the one that I talked about with Bart and Whitney, but I'm hoping there'll be more at some point. So if anybody wants any buddy reads, please let me know. I would love to join you, probably. Obviously, it depends on the book, but those are just some side notes that will highly affect the rest of my reading. So hopefully I'll get to all of those guaranteed ones. That's why they're guaranteed, I'm getting to them. So the other ones that are high on my priority list are as follows. And I'll just choose as I see fit, but obviously life will choose for me a lot of the time. So 2 series that are very high up on my list are Xenogenesis by Octavia E. Butler, starting with the book Dawn. Now I'm really starting to enjoy Octavia E. Butler's works, so this is one that has been highly recommended to me by Whitney and Bart. So I really want to get to this trilogy, I believe it is, and I believe Dawn is one of her best books according to Whitney, so absolutely want to get to that. Now I have read the Commonwealth Saga by Peter F. Hamilton, and I want to get to more of his books. So I really want to read the Night Dawn trilogy. I think he himself considers this his best work, his best series. And these are 3 humongous books, pure space opera, which if you know this channel, you know I love. So I am really keen to get to this trilogy and find out more about Hamilton's work. Some standalones that are highly likely to squeeze in between. A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro. Now I've read every single book of his apart from this one. He is one of my favourite authors of all time. Check out my top 10 authors list. I'll put a link in the description. And this is the only one I haven't read. It's his first book. So I've not been putting it off for any reason. It's just life again. So I really, really want to get to this. I want to complete his bibliography, so I need to read this, and hopefully I can do that within 2025. As I talked about earlier, I want to read more Stephen King because he is one of my favorite authors of all time. So I have on my Kindle Under the Dome. Now that is a huge book with an apparently controversial ending. So we'll see about that. I do really want to read it, and I will at some point. The one I really, really, really want to read is Pet Sematary. I've heard so many good things about it, but I like to buy things secondhand or on the Kindle store. In fact, I don't own every single book I've read physically. Anyway, continuing. If I find Pet Sematary, I will read that. I really, really want to read that, so that depends. Adrian Tchaikovsky, I've already talked about him today. I really want to read some more of his stuff. He has a couple of standalones. On my Kindle, I have Doors of Eden. So I really want to get to that. A nice standalone from Adrian Tchaikovsky sounds like just what I want before maybe in 2026 going to some of his other series, because he's got a lot. Also, any novellas, if they pop up anywhere, I will pick them up and try and squeeze them in. Them being of shorter page count, I will probably read them. Another short book is Babel 17 by Samuel Delaney. I haven't read any of his books. I've heard they are quite difficult, but I love that. So I really want to try that. I have it on my Kindle, so hopefully I can squeeze that in at some point. I've heard he's brilliant. Another one in a similar vein is Inverted World. I've talked about trying to read the Gallant's Sci-Fi Masterworks books. This is one of them. So is Babel 17, actually. So I've heard amazing things about this absolute classic of sci-fi. I've heard it's very strange, so I really want to get to that. It's short. Hopefully I can squeeze that in. Also, I talked about short stories recently. I'll put a link in the description. Obviously, always be plugging. And how I'm not the biggest fan, but I want to read more to try and get into them more. So I have a bunch of short story collections that I want to get to that can kind of be palate cleansers between bigger reads. If you want to find out the kind of books, the collections that I want to read, check that video that I just talked about. So now the long list, the ones that I do really want to read, but time will probably not permit that. Now, obviously my TBR is endless and all of these things I want to read, but I have to choose somehow. So I'm just going to reel off a list of books that I want to read. No pictures or anything, because I want to be quick about it, which is something I can't do like now. So the series that I really want to read, Book of the New Sun, really difficult apparently, but amazing. I really want to read it. Bas Lag trilogy by China Mieville. I've heard this is weird but super interesting, so I really want to get to that. In a similar vein is IQ84 by Haruki Murakami. Really want to read more Japanese works, and you know, this guy is probably the most famous, at least on YouTube. I'm interested in the Boudica series by Manda Scott, which is a historical fiction series that the Brothers Gwyn are always bigging up. I've heard it's really good. I've enjoyed some historical fiction recently. Standalones, I do have a couple to hold up actually. Fever Dream, George R.R. Martin, really want to go outside of A Song of Ice and Fire. Ghost Written, David Mitchell, I've read 3 of his, loved 2 of them, want to see what else he can do. Cat's Cradle, Kurt Vonnegut, absolutely classic writer. I've only read 1 of his and loved it, want to continue reading his stuff. The Long Walk by Richard Frederick. What's his name? The Bachman guy that Stephen King used to pretend to be. I want to read that. Dystopian, so my bag. I want to read The Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. I've heard brilliant things about that. I have it on my Kindle. I want to read Cage of Souls by Adrian Tchaikovsky, another standalone, but I hear mixed things about it, so that's why it's further down on the list. And I really want to read Guy Gavriel Kay. Like, everybody's been banging on about him, so I really want to get to him. Again, if I find his books somewhere and not have to pay the full price, then I'll buy them and he'll be shooting up that list. And, you know, basically if I find anything out in the wild or on the Kindle store that really piques my interest, that will get on this long list, maybe further up. We shall see. Richard Bachman. Richard Bachman was the pseudonym that Stephen King had. Sorry about that. Anyway, that's the end of the video. So thank you so much if you've made it this far. It's going to be an exciting year. It's a daunting year, but I genuinely am excited about all of my guaranteed reads. I'm excited about the other ones that could squeeze in there. I'm excited about going to study English. It's going to be a great year, I think. So let me know if you've read any of these books, if you recommend any of them to move further up the list from those ones that aren't in guaranteed. Let me know what you plan on reading, if you're planning on reading any of the same as me. And I think that is about it for now. So thank you once again, and I'll see you in another video soon. Goodbye.